Hello, world, and welcome to the In My Footsteps podcast. I am Christopher Setterland, coming to you from the vacation destination known as Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and this is episode 231. It's Valentine's week. I don't have a box of chocolates for you, but I do have a heavy dose of GenX nostalgia. At least these will never go bad. We're going to kick it off with a look back at the origins of online dating, specifically the site kiss.com. For those of you looking to drown your sorrows during Valentine's week, I will be going way back in the day and talking about the beginnings of the McDonaldland universe and all those beloved characters. If you think Valentine's Day is overhyped, well, we're going to have a brand new top 5 that looks back at the most overhyped athletes of the 1980s. And if you think Valentine's Day is the devil itself, this week in history, we're going to look back at the fascinating 19th century urban legend of the Devil's Footprints. All of that is coming up as we celebrate Valentine's Week on episode 231 of the In My Footsteps podcast. So what are we going to talk about this week? All about Valentine's. I'm sure there are so many differing opinions on the Valentine's Day tradition. Some people love it, some people go all out, some people hate it. Where do you all fall on it? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Whatever your opinions are, thank you so much for tuning in to the show. I will do my best to make Valentine's week better if you hate it, and try not to ruin it too much if you love it. We've got so much to get into this week, but I obviously cannot start the podcast off without thanking my Patreon subscribers, my biggest backers, Laurie, Mary Lou, Ashley, Kevin, Leo, Marguerite, Neglectoid, Crystal, Matt, Dr. Shrimp Porto Chico. Thank you all for being the biggest supporters, my all-stars that literally put your money where your mouth is to support me, my continuing quest to be a self-sustaining, self-employed content creator. If you enjoy my work, you enjoy my content, you can become a Patreon subscriber for $5 a month. You get access to bonus podcast episodes, including the Hidden Track podcast that went up this week, the second one, where we talk about the most dangerous toy ever created. And you get access to the remastered Without a Map live streams, which go up during the middle of the month. I've also got a pretty good free tier over there, so you can go and just become a free member and poke around and see what's there. I wanted to make sure before we start to give a special shout out, welcome to any of you that are tuning into the show for the first time that found me within the last few weeks during my relative viral phase on Instagram and TikTok. For those that don't know, in the last few weeks, I've seen a massive growth in my presence on social media, mainly thanks to a video that I shot of the slush waves on the north side of Cape Cod. It was a collaboration with a big Boston Instagram account, the Boston Cal. I never expected that video to get well over 1 million views and for it to just blow up my social media. On Instagram and TikTok, I don't have the official numbers, but I would say I've gotten somewhere around 3 million views of my content in the last 2 weeks. 100,000 or more likes on different videos. I've more than doubled my followers on Instagram. It's really fun and exciting, but the irony is I don't know how to capitalize on this momentum. I'm no expert in creating viral videos, and so not knowing how to create viral videos, it's sort of by accident. So all I can keep doing is shooting more of the videos of the Cape Cod ice flows until they melt and keep sharing them, and then once they're gone, I'll just see what else is out there to film. But yes, welcome into anybody who's tuning in for the first time after seeing about me within the last few weeks on social media. I hope you enjoyed GenX nostalgia because that's basically what I do here. We can get into more housekeeping stuff at the end of the show. I want to kick Valentine's week off right, or kick Valentine's Day to the curb if you hate it. So let's start off episode 231 with a look back at the origins of online dating, starting now. Dating in the 2020s is, on one hand, very convenient and also way more difficult. Believe me, I know. You have so many options when it comes to dating sites, dating apps, that on one hand, you've got so many options that it makes it where you almost can't fail in finding someone to at least go on a date with. But on the other hand, there are so many options that you can be more choosy with who you spend your time on. Meaning that if you don't find anyone that floats your boat, you just keep going to these sites day after day and swiping left, I believe it is, to say no. That doesn't mean that the old ways of connecting with people and finding love are dead. I know plenty of people in my life that have met their significant other or whoever they're currently with by being set up by friends. But then again, I also have friends that have met their significant others through dating apps. I think the stigma around finding your significant other online has died down a little bit compared to where it was 10, 15 years ago. But we're not here to talk about the 2020s. We're here to talk about nostalgia. Let's harken back to the 1960s, where Harvard students created Operation Match, which was a service where participants filled out questionnaires that were processed by a computer to suggest potential matches. This was one of the earliest examples of computer-assisted matchmaking. And although Operation Match didn't operate online because there wasn't internet back in the 60s, it set the groundwork for what would be online dating. In between Operation Match and the creation of the first dating site, there was video dating. You would film yourself on a VHS tape, I know, back then, just talking about who you were, answering some specific questions, and then people could watch your tape and see if they were interested in you. I even remember, this was probably in the 90s, there was video dating on demand. Does anyone remember that? When you could go on demand and just look at, it was the same thing except it was on demand. You just click their profile and watch what they were talking about themselves. VHS tapes, video dating. It's mainly trying to help facilitate meeting for people that might not have the time. If you work 50 hours a week, how often do you have to go out to a bar or a restaurant or to even friends' houses to meet someone? It's all about convenience as much as it was compatibility. So in 1994, when the internet was really in its infancy, there was a launch of the very first dating site, Kiss.com. This was founded by American entrepreneur Terence Lee Zurer. Just picture in your mind any dating site, and that's pretty much what Kiss.com was. It was one of the first platforms where users could create profiles, upload photos, and communicate with potential matches over the web. Granted, in 1994, it probably took 15 minutes to load one grainy pixelated photo, but hey, you gotta start somewhere. And there was a market for online dating because Kiss.com quickly grew in popularity, eventually becoming the first picture-based personal site to reach 1 million registered members. Kiss.com helped to establish features that would become standard for online dating. The user profiles with photos, direct messaging. You could kind of pare down what you were looking for based on your own interests and based on what you were looking for in a match by height, body, distance from where you live. You can go on now to dating sites like Hinge and Bumble. And if you just put in your name in a picture and you're not specific with the details you're looking for, you could easily find hundreds of matches within 50, 75, 100 miles. Especially if you're in a city, you could probably find thousands. That's where the option overload comes in. But Kiss.com was the first. They definitely weren't the biggest or the best. The big pioneer in online dating was Match.com, which came around in 1995, which I can't believe it's been around for over 30 years. Match.com helped transform online dating from a niche internet curiosity into an actual mainstream way for singles to meet, practice courtship, form relationships. Even though Kiss.com was the first to market it by a year, Match.com's broader appeal and longevity made it the defining early platform for online matchmaking. It definitely was an introvert's dream, those that are not good with approaching strangers, especially those you might be interested in romantically. It's way easier to send an instant message or direct message. You can sit back and think about what you want to say. You want it to be something really impactful, and then you write, "Hi, you're cute," and wonder why you fail. Not saying that from experience or anything, just saying I've heard these things. The mid-1990s were a turning point in online dating and also in the internet in general. The World Wide Web had recently become accessible to the general public, which lowered barriers for people to interact online. It was my senior year of high school, 95 into 96, that my family first got access to the internet. No, I did not immediately go on dating sites, but if I had wanted to, I could, although I was underage, so I don't know if that was possible. That's where trouble starts. In that time, though, online dating sites shifted the idea of personal ads and the video dating into dynamic, searchable digital formats. Like I said a minute ago, for the early adopters of online dating, and even to this day, it's stigmatized. And that started as early as in 1998 with the movie You Got Mail, that humorously portrayed Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks falling in love through email. That is one of probably the biggest issue with online dating, is that people can create fake profiles. You get someone that says she's 23 and lives in Fall River, Massachusetts, and she's really cute, and she's really 65, living in a shack in rural Illinois. And she, quote unquote, immediately needs you to send money to her because she's in trouble. That's where catfishing came from. It's like an offshoot of online dating. I've seen that way too many times because, in all transparency, I have been and still am on a couple of dating sites because I don't have time to go out and meet people. And it's also harder when you get into your 40s. Like they say, by this time, all the good ones are taken and the ones that are left are crazy. I don't know what that says about me. Oh, man. Anyway, let me back off this ledge. So, once the World Wide Web took off in the late 90s into the early 2000s, online dating expanded rapidly. You had a lot more sites coming up, like eHarmony, which launched in 2000. This is a site that was one of the first algorithms designed to match couples based on deep compatibility surveys, which is great. But unless you're a subscriber to their site, you don't get photos, you get blurry images. So that's a site where you really, really have to trust that you want to fall in love with someone based only on personality. You had dozens of specialized sites appearing through the early 2000s, serving religious groups, ethnic communities, and niche interests. You had sites like OkCupid that came out in 2004, Badoo that came out in 2006, which brought new matching tools, social features. Then you had the launch of smartphones, and you had dating apps like Tinder in 2012. That's more of the hookup site. I'm too old for that. All the way to this day, there are new dating apps that are coming out. I mentioned Hinge and Bumble. Those are the two that I see that are biggest, most trendy, besides Tinder. If you're looking for a date on a dating app, dating site, like I said, with so many specialized sites and so many ways to narrow down what you're looking for, it's almost impossible not to find at least someone to go on a date with. I mean, unless you live in the most rural of rural areas, then your options are kind of limited. But even on Cape Cod, I can find a few dozen matches. Online dating in the last 30 years has gone from fringe to mainstream, with millions of relationships and marriages traced back to these digital introductions. One of my closest friends, he met his now wife on Match.com. They've been together for, I believe, 17 years. I know some friends that have had long, meaningful relationships through eHarmony. Me, not so lucky. I have gone on a few dates from dating sites, They haven't worked out, but then again, I've been set up on blind dates that also haven't worked out, so it doesn't really matter. Even if you've never gone on a dating site, and woo, aren't you special? It's at least comforting to know that it's there if you ever need it, because dating sites, dating apps, they've reshaped how people think about connection, prioritizing compatibility, data, shared interests, and even algorithmic recommendations. So what are your thoughts about online dating? Do you think it's a stupid waste of time? Are you on 24 dating sites as we speak? And my older listeners in your 50s and 60s, did you ever do the video dating or personal ads? Hopefully not personals and Craigslist. That's the way you end up dead in a dumpster. Me, I'm of the mindset that as long as you meet the one you want to be with, who cares how you do it? Whether it's online or in person. Because everybody wants to connect and find love. I mean, that's the bottom line with all of this. This week in history, we are going back 171 years to February 8th, 1855, and the legend of the Devil's Footprints. Just what are the Devil's Footprints? Let's cast ourselves back to the bitter cold winter of February 1855. This is where an enigmatic event unfolded across the snowy landscape of East and South Devon, England. This was a phenomenon that would later be known as the Devil's Footprints. On the morning of February 9th, 1855, after heavy snowfall the night before, residents awoke to find a series of mysterious marks in the fresh snow. Across more than 30 towns and villages in Devon, including Exmouth, Topsham, Dawlish, and Tingmouth, and others, people were astonished to see a single file trail of strange, hoof-like marks stretching across the countryside. Now, depending on the source, the tracks extended for an estimated 40 to more than 100 miles in total. Eyewitness descriptions reported that each print was roughly 4 inches long and 3 inches wide, spaced anywhere from 8 to 16 inches apart, and it appeared like they were cloven hoof marks, the kind traditionally associated with goats or in folklore depictions of the devil. What made the phenomenon especially strange, and still difficult to explain to this day, was the improbable route that these tracks seemed to take. According to contemporary reports, the prints traveled in straight lines over houses, haystacks, walls, and rivers. Marks were found on snow-covered rooftops, even leading up and out of narrow drain pipes that were only a few inches wide. Obviously, there have been so many hoaxes of things like this over the centuries, but if this was a hoax, it's such a dedication to the hoax itself. Local newspapers at the time reported that the tracks were unlike anything seen before and sowed fear among locals. Some even declared that they were the marks of Satan himself, lending the event to the name the Devil's Footprints. In 1950, a collection of papers belonging to Henry Thomas Ellacombe. Ellacombe was the vicar of Clyst St. George in the 1850s. Among these letters that were from parishioners had diagrams of the footprints, one of the few surviving primary sources on the event. Over the years, many theories have been suggested to explain the footprints, including animals, where naturalists propose that animal tracks from rodents or quadrupeds could create bizarre patterns in the deep snow. But it comes back to an animal walking in a straight line for 40 to 100 miles, not deviating from it, so that seems unlikely. There were rumors at the time of exotic or escaped animals, such as kangaroos, where their prints would be something unknown to people living in England. But again, 40 to 100 miles of a straight line, including going over people's houses. There are theories of hoaxes, human activity, freak weather conditions, but still it comes back to supernatural or folklore interpretations. Many locals, influenced by religious beliefs and folklore, interpreted the tracks as evidence of a supernatural visitor with some gut instincts pointing to the devil. Despite more than 150 years of speculation, no definitive explanation has been agreed upon. This event remains a staple of British folklore, with history books and articles and even modern investigations. The devil's footprints continue to capture attention today, not just as a historical curiosity, but a symbol of how unexplained phenomena can blur the lines between folklore, science, and imagination. And those devil's footprints first appeared 171 years ago this week in history. Now it's time for a brand new time capsule. For this, we are going back to Valentine's Day, February 14th, 1975, 51 years ago this week. What was going on in the world of pop culture back then? Well, let's find out. The number one song was Fire by the Ohio Players. This is a funk/disco song. It spent 2 weeks at number one off of the Ohio Players album entitled Fire. It's considered one of their signature songs, with the other one being Love Roller Coaster. The album Fire was certified platinum, selling more than 1 million copies, and was a staple of dance clubs throughout the 70s into the early 80s. The number one movie was Towering Inferno, and you could get into the theater with a ticket costing $2.03. Interesting that it's Valentine's week, and the song is Fire, the movie is Towering Inferno. I don't know if that's just coincidence. This was an action drama starring, among others, Steve McQueen, Paul Newman, Faye Dunaway, Fred Astaire. It's about a fire that breaks out in a state-of-the-art San Francisco high-rise building and the struggle to save the lives of the people inside. The movie was a big hit, making $203 million on a budget of $14 million. And it is currently 69% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. The movie was also nominated for 8 Academy Awards, winning 3. The number one TV show was Sanford & Son. This is definitely fitting with the recent death of Demond Wilson, who played Fred Sanford's son Lamont, aka Big Dummy. Sanford & Son starred Red Fox as Fred Sanford. The show was on for 6 seasons and 136 total episodes between 1972 and 77, with the show being in the top 10 in the ratings every year in its first 5 years. And if you were around back then, Valentine's Day, 1975, whether you're looking to take a date out on the town or you're looking to drown your sorrows, we can all go to the same place, McDonald's. You can head down to McDonald's. What's on their menu in 1975? You could get a hamburger for 28 cents, cheeseburger for 33 cents, large fries for 46 cents, a large drink for 20 cents, and a Big Mac for 65 cents. In case you're wondering, that means a Big Mac should cost you $3.92 today when adjusted for inflation. It does not. It costs you on an average $5.79, so McDonald's is overpriced. But don't worry, if you go into McDonald's in 1975, you can collect all 12 Ronald McDonald Valentines. These would be great to hand out to your classmates. But if you're going on a serious date, I don't know if giving them a Ronald McDonald Valentine would seal the deal. Maybe you could give them a bouquet of French fries. Please don't listen to my ideas. But that'll wrap up another This Week in History, another time capsule. Now for the top 5, we're going to take a little side route into the world of 1980s sports as we look at the most overhyped athletes of the 1980s. Let's see if any of your favorites are on this list. I'm sure you longtime listeners know by now that my top 5 lists are pretty much all subjective. They are my opinions. I say that because this week's top 5 about overhyped 1980s athletes, It's sure to irritate at least someone out there who sees one of these athletes as the greatest of all time. Besides being my opinion, the way that I looked at overhyped athletes were the ones that got way too much time on SportsCenter or other sports shows when their stats, their numbers, their contributions to the sport don't match up to the amount of time they got. Some of these athletes were promoted as being the next big thing in their sports, and they ultimately failed at that. I tried not to make it all athletes that could have been or the biggest busts, because I can always make other lists like that. In fact, in episode 204, I did a segment on the top could have been athletes. Ones who had issues either with injuries or other off-the-field issues. So if you're looking for something like that, you can go back into the archives. As with most of these top fives, they are in no particular order, and I've got some honorable mentions to whet your appetite for what I think will fit the bill for this week's list. Honorable mentions for overhyped 1980s athletes include Dave Kingman. He was a baseball player that played in the 80s for the Mets and the Athletics. The prototypical all-power or strikeout guy, much like Mark McGwire, or someone that locals might remember from the Red Sox, Rob Deere, who played for the Sox in 1993. He had more home runs, 230, than batting average points, 220. Another honorable mention is Corey Snyder, another baseball player. He came up with the Cleveland Indians. Majorly hyped as one of the next big things, had 3 good seasons, and then his numbers fell off a cliff after 1988. Another honorable mention is Sam Bowie. He was a basketball center. It's not all his fault, but he was picked ahead of Michael Jordan in the 1984 NBA draft. He was decent, averaging 11 points, but also suffered through a lot of injuries. And when looking at what Michael Jordan was with 6 world titles and averaging 30 points a game, it was a big mistake. Another honorable mention is Vince Coleman. He was a baseball player for the St. Louis Cardinals in the 80s, a big stolen base threat, and even a 2-time All-Star. But his numbers really didn't correspond to the amount of hype that he got. Plus, he was considered one of the biggest a-holes in baseball, including throwing what was the equivalent of a quarter stick of dynamite from his car at a group of fans in 1993. And the final honorable mention for overhyped 1980s athletes is Bernie Kosar. He was the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. He was hyped as the quarterback that was going to lead the Browns to their first Super Bowl. He ended up being a .500 quarterback, never leading the Browns past the AFC title game. So those are the honorable mentions. Again, these are not total bums. They're just people that were given way more hype than their stats would lead you to believe they deserved. So let's get into the actual top 5. And we're going to start off with the one that gave me the idea for this list in the first place. And that's number 1. Brian Bosworth. He was a football player, linebacker for the Seattle Seahawks. He is the definition of overhyped. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated before he even played a snap in the NFL. He had commercials, endorsements. His hype was pretty much blown up during a 1987 game between the Seahawks and the Los Angeles Raiders, when running back Bo Jackson basically steamrolled him and went into the end zone for a touchdown. He was pretty much never the same after that. He had 4 career sacks in parts of 3 seasons. He was out of the NFL before the 80s ended, but at least he had his film Stone Cold from 1991. It is 30% fresh, so that's probably more fresh than his NFL career was. Number 2 is Jim McMahon. He was the quarterback on the legendary 1985 Chicago Bears football team that won Super Bowl 20 by kicking the crap out of my New England Patriots. He was very loud, brash, kind of obnoxious, wore his headband and sunglasses with his spiky black hair. But when you think about reasons for the Bears' success in 1985, Jim McMahon is way down the list. In between 1984 and 1988, he was 36-5 as a starting quarterback, but threw for only 46 touchdowns and 36 interceptions, showing that the success of the Bears was more on Walter Payton and the defense than Jim McMahon. Once he left Chicago, after the 88 season, he was exposed as a mediocre at best quarterback over the ensuing 8 seasons, throwing more interceptions than touchdowns. Number 3 is Darryl Dawkins. He was a basketball player whose biggest claim to fame was being able to shatter backboards when he threw down the amazing slam dunks. Think of him as Shaquille O'Neal with like 1/10 of the talent, where Shaq could break the backboards, but also give you 28 points and 15 rebounds and lead you to championships. He looked the part, 6'11", 250 pounds, with a cool nickname, Chocolate Thunder, but he never made an all-star team, never led a team to a championship, and averaged 12 points and 6 rebounds for his career, so his stats were inflated by the fact that he could shatter backboards. In fact, the closest Darryl Dawkins came to an NBA championship was in his final season. He played for the Detroit Pistons, but he only played in 14 games and was released before the Pistons went on to win the NBA title. Speaking of those Detroit Pistons, number 4 is Bill Laimbeer. Think about what I said about Jim McMahon a few minutes ago and apply all of that to Bill Laimbeer, except add in the fact that he was just a piece of crap human being. At least on the court he was. He was a big punk instigator, but I guess that was part of the bad boys of the Detroit Pistons. He did win back-to-back NBA titles with them, but the fact is they had Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, Dennis Rodman. Boy, it almost sounds like I grew up watching Laimbeer and the Pistons go against the Boston Celtics. But despite him being a 4-time All-Star and 2-time NBA champion, I think he was given way too much credit on those Pistons teams. You could have replaced him with almost any functioning center at the time, and the Pistons would have been as good or maybe even better. This is one I'm sure there's going to be some blowback from people that are Pistons fans. You can come back at me and say Bill Laimbeer is like what Danny Ainge was on the Celtics in the 80s. You'd be right. You could replace Danny Ainge with pretty much any functioning guard and the Celtics would have still won titles. And yes, a lot of people that weren't in Boston hated Danny Ainge and thought he was a punk instigator, so I guess it's two sides of the same coin. And finally, number 5 on the list of overhyped 1980s athletes is Wally Joyner. He was a much ballyhooed first baseman for the California Angels. I immediately thought of him when thinking of overhyped athletes based on my baseball card collecting of the time, and how collecting a few Wally Joyner rookie cards were seen to be a good investment. His first 2 seasons were good, including him finishing second in Rookie of the Year voting in 1986 and making the All-Star team in 1987. After that, his numbers go down. He is slightly above average at best. He didn't end up becoming a bum. He had more than 2,000 hits, but based on the hype for him when he first came into the majors, he ended up nowhere near what people thought he would be. If you go on baseballreference.com, which is one of my favorite sites, that and basketball and football reference, it's got every stat you'd ever want. You can do similarity scores to see what players are most similar to the ones you're looking up. Wally Joyner is similar to players like Hal McRae and Jeff Conine. Hardly Reggie Jackson or Andre Dawson or other big-time hitters from the time he came up. But like I said, it is all subjective. It is all my thoughts and opinions. But what did you think? That is the top 5 overhyped 1980s athletes. I highly doubt you agree with all of my picks, but do you agree with some? Maybe Bosworth and that's it? Well, maybe we can agree on the fact that McDonald's was a huge part of all of our childhoods. So let's finish this Valentine's Week episode of the podcast with a look back at the beginning of the McDonaldland universe and all the fun characters that came with that. So many of us Gen X kids that grew up in the 70s, 80s, 90s, we grew up on not just McDonald's the food, but McDonald's the world, the experience. I am sure loads of you out there listening, not only can you remember your favorite foods from McDonald's, whether it was the fries or McNuggets or burgers or Filet-O-Fish, but you can remember the characters and the commercials, especially from the 80s. That was my time. There aren't many businesses, franchises that have their own universe. You know, this whole mythos surrounding their business. You don't find that at any other restaurant. Wendy's, Burger King, they have mascots. There's no mythical land based around Starbucks or Walmart. I guess it's fitting. There's only one place that could have been possible, and that is McDonald's. McDonaldland. Back in episode 153, I did a segment about the end of McDonaldland. That sad time that ended a lot of our childhoods when Ronald and his gang were not featured as much in the McDonald's ads. I said at some point in the future I would do a more happy segment about the beginning of McDonaldland and all about it at its heyday. And here we are, only a year and a half later, and I'm doing it. Hey, if you saw my notes that I have as far as subjects I could do on the podcast, you'd see how easy it is for me to get sidetracked for a year and a half. So come with me, won't you please, as we step under the golden arches, through the magical door, into McDonaldland. Here we go, back to the far-off land of the early 1970s.
Get yourself ready for a trip through McDonaldland. Take along a friend and grab a hold of Ronald's hand.
It was here that McDonald's did something unusual for any company, and that was build an entire fantasy universe around it. That universe, called McDonaldland, became home to a colorful cast of characters, from a burger-headed mayor to a purple milkshake-loving monster. It really turned McDonald's into a cultural icon for children and families. By the early 70s, McDonald's was already a household name for its burgers and fries, but the company wanted to deepen emotional engagement with the kids, and that would help differentiate it from the competitors like Wendy's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Burger King. McDonald's partnered with the advertising agency Needham, Harper, and Steers in 1970 and 71 to invent a world where the McDonald's menu items and mascots came to life. It was a pretty simple idea. Create characters and stories that children would remember long after watching a TV commercial or visiting the restaurant. I would say, looking back on that 55 years later, they did a good job, because people my age, a little older, a little younger, you all remember, I spent the beginning of this segment talking about it. But for those that may not remember or may have no idea of what McDonaldland was, it was a fictional, fantastical environment. Maybe a little bit like the Land of Oz, where everything revolved around McDonald's products. You had French fry bushes where fries grew like plants, hamburger patches, the fields of burgers sprouting from the ground, apple pie trees, thick shake volcanoes, Filet-O-Fish lake. It's like, when you think about it looking back now, it all sounds so stupid, but it worked so well. Just think of any fast food place today besides McDonald's. Could you make a universe out of their products and create characters around them? But all those elements that I just spoke about, they appeared in TV commercials, print ads, promotional materials, and the Play Place playgrounds. Say that 5 times fast. That's one thing that's sad about the McDonald's today in the 2020s, is that it's so sterile. McDonald's, when I used to go in the 80s as a kid, it had a playground where you felt like you were connecting with these characters. Now it's like this gray box of a building with nothing in there that even remotely looks like what it used to be. I'm not saying you need to bring back indoor playgrounds at McDonald's filled with the characters, but maybe if you did, maybe I'd go play in it at almost 50. God, that would be bad.
Who's the McFriendliest fellow in town? Who's our McFavorite hamburger clown? Who's Peter funniest? Who's Smiley sunniest? Ronald McDonald.
McDonaldland had several very famous characters. First and foremost was Ronald McDonald. He was the friendly clown mascot. Although he was introduced in the early 60s and was played by Willard Scott, the McDonaldland universe gave Ronald McDonald a home and stories where he wasn't just some creepy clown with a cup for a nose. He became the spokesman, the cheerful leader of McDonaldland, embodying the fun and family-friendly energy that McDonald's wanted to project. Then you had Ronald McDonald's first nemesis, the Hamburglar. He debuted in 1971. He was a mischievous, striped outfit-wearing hamburger thief. His antics and his catchphrase, "Robble, robble," made him a recurring antagonist, but also a favorite. He was meant to be a playful thief, not a serious one that would shank Ronald behind the building. He basically didn't say any words. I think he said burgers, but it was all a bunch of garbled gibberish.
So, what should you yell when you see it?
Help Ronald, sailor!
That's right.
Uh-oh.
Hamburglar.
It's a good time for the train.
You've got a lot to learn.
Don't take burgers, Rubble Rubble.
Then you had the enemy that became a friend that was known as Grimace. At first, when he came out in 1971, he was Evil Grimace, a multi-armed purple villain who stole milkshakes. It was hard for me to believe that Grimace was evil at the beginning. He basically looks like a gumdrop with arms and big dopey eyes. It'd be like finding out that Barney the dinosaur was a petty thief before he got his children's show. Despite his evil beginnings, today Grimace represents good times and McDonald's shakes, which was most recently highlighted in the viral Grimace Shake promotion of 2023. That was kind of the crew that would stick around. You had some characters that came and went, like Mayor McCheese and Officer Big Mac. You had the Professor, who was the one that invented things in McDonaldland, Captain Crook, who would want to steal the fillet of fish. Then in the 80s, they added more. They added Birdie the Early Bird. She was the first female character and was created to promote the McDonald's breakfast menu. Although when I was a little kid, I looked at it and I thought it said Bride the Early Bird. I couldn't figure out what that meant. Then I learned to read. You had the hamburgers, the actual little ones that would talk. The Hamburglar would steal. You had the McNugget buddies. They'd be in the little styrofoam containers, 6 of them. You had the trippy fry kids that used to be goblins. They were weird. They just looked like big, shaggy creatures. They were just obsessed with fries. These characters were all in the commercials in the 70s and 80s. Some of these commercials were a full minute long, so you'd get kind of adventures of these characters. Instead of just promoting a product, there'd be a story to it.
Ronald McDonald and friends in the Hamburglar Touch.
Rubble cheeseburgers!
That Hamburglar wishes everything he touches would turn to McDonald's cheeseburgers.
Cheeseburgers? Touch cheeseburger!
As I mentioned in the segment about the ending of McDonaldland, there was legal trouble between McDonald's and the children's TV show HR Pufnstuf. That show's creators, Sid and Marty Krofft, sued McDonald's in 1973, claiming that McDonaldland was too derivative of their products. A judge later ruled in favor of the Kroffts, awarding them damages and basically telling them they had to get rid of Mayor McCheese. But despite that, it was too late. McDonaldland was already a cultural force. Throughout the 70s, through the entirety of the 90s, McDonaldland was in its golden age. Loads of TV commercials, tons of Happy Meal toys. You had promotional tie-ins like board games and books. Like I said, there were the Play Place playgrounds. McDonald's had succeeded in making Ronald, Grimace, Hamburglar, Birdie as popular as the food itself. That is the big reason why when I'm talking about McDonaldland and talking about those golden days, I'm sure most of you have memories of going to McDonald's or seeing the ads. Back in episode 127, I did a employee training video review about how to cook McNuggets when they first came out, and it includes the McNugget buddies. So even in promoting to their employees in-house training videos, they use these characters. In the early 2000s, McDonald's began to phase out McDonaldland from major marketing as it shifted toward more food-centric and adult-oriented campaigns. I don't know if they had market research showing that the McDonaldland characters were fading in popularity. It's sort of like if it's not broke, why fix it? Of course, if your food is not healthy and then you're promoting it towards kids, you may want to stop that. But if they were looking to change just for change's sake, that's fine. They might want to think about doing that now because they've had that same stupid ba-da-ba slogan for 25 years. I would say if you've used the same slogan for a quarter century, it might be time to update your marketing. And why not bring back McDonaldland? That's kind of what they did. In the 2020s, McDonald's has started bringing back their McDonaldland characters, but strategically. Grimace came around on his 52nd birthday, going viral with the Grimace Shake in 2023. Last year in 2025, McDonald's launched a McDonaldland meal featuring collectible memorabilia, a Mount McDonaldland shake, highlighting characters like Ronald, Grimace, Hamburglar, Birdie, and Mayor McCheese. It's like everything's going full circle. Now all we need to do is have them bring back the prices like they had back in the day. It does make sense, though, starting to bring back the McDonaldland characters, because they were created for us, our generation, Gen X, and we're now the ones that have kids, or even the oldest of us might have grandkids. So we need some nostalgia. Do you remember McDonaldland? Do you remember those commercials from the 80s, especially for me? Who was your favorite character? And really, could you have seen that type of marketing creating a whole universe of characters around a fast food place working for anywhere else? It's like every other restaurant chain had one spokesperson and that was pretty much it. So McDonaldland was more than just a fictional backdrop. It shaped how millions of children in the 70s through the 90s saw McDonald's. By embedding food items into a rich, imaginary world full of characters and stories, McDonald's wasn't just selling hamburgers, it was selling fun, friendship, and memories. Even decades after its peak and after it's been phased down or phased out, McDonaldland remains a powerful piece of brand heritage that the company and its fans, like me, continue to rediscover and celebrate to this day. But until next week, that's going to wrap up episode 231 of the In My Footsteps podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for making it to the end. Whether this is your first show or your 231st show, I appreciate you so much checking out my work. You can find content of mine all over the place. I have 10 books. You can check out my website, ChristopherSetterland.com. I have a YouTube channel. I do weekly blogs, including the Initial Impressions 2.0 blog, which is the weekly look back at my wacky life. And you can find me all over social media. Now I'm really not hard to find. Instagram, TikTok, Threads. I have a Facebook fan page for the podcast. You can also go and purchase your copy of the Blu-ray version of Cape Cod Cthulhu, my acting debut. The film came out at the end of last year. It should be available on streaming sometime in the near future, and I'll share that as well. Of course, I'll have more information in the coming months about my feature-length film debut, my producing debut. It's kind of the hurry up and wait part of it. I wrote the script, the director liked it. I've got all the information I need about the fundraising that'll go on coming up later in the spring. There's not much else I can do on that front. But if you enjoy my work, and if you've made it this far, I'm hoping you at least like it a little bit, You can support me by becoming a subscriber on Patreon for $5 a month. You can also buy me a coffee. Those are as little as $1 and they're not recurring. But if parting with your hard-earned money isn't feasible, and I totally understand, you can share my work, and that does a great deal to help me out. You never know when the right set of eyes is going to get on something you did. That's literally how I ended up with 2 viral videos in the same week. That was just luck of having someone see my stuff and wanting to collaborate. Who knows? Maybe I end up with many more viral videos. Maybe I can't find the proper content to get another one, but I'm going to keep trying. Maybe your peak is your peak and you go down from there, but you never know. Nobody achieves success thinking, well, this is as good as it gets. It's always like, well, let's see what else I can do. That's the way I've always felt. I remember being so excited when I had one poem published in a poetry book in like 2003. I couldn't imagine if I looked at myself in the mirror back then and said, well, that's good enough. So that's why I'm always working on something. And speaking of that, the train doesn't stop rolling. Next week is episode 232. We're going to look back at the last 10 games ever released for the original Nintendo Entertainment System. Because it's the month of love still, we're going to go back in the day, and nothing says love more than talking about the dating game killer, Rodney Alcala. There'll be a brand new top 5 as we look at the top 5 1970s teen idols and teen queens, 5 of each. So all of that and more is coming up next week on episode 232 of the In My Footsteps podcast. If you're celebrating Valentine's Day this weekend, I hope that it's the best that it can be. If you're not celebrating Valentine's Day this weekend, I hope that your weekend is as good as it can be also. I don't have a dog in the fight. I'd love to celebrate Valentine's Day, but it's not going to break my heart if I don't. And don't worry, we are a little over a month out from spring. Temperatures have been creeping towards 40 on Cape Cod. Woo! Unfortunately, it's melting the ice floes that gave me so many views on social media, so I'm torn. It's like, as much as I want it to be spring, the ice floes in Cape Cod Bay have done right by me, so I'm sad to see them start going. But before you know it, it'll be spring again, and we can all get outside and have fun in the warmer weather. Until then, though, I'll do my best to keep you entertained at least a little bit each week, as we try to get through the final weeks of the dog days of winter. But until next time, remember, in this life, don't walk in anyone else's footsteps, create your own path, and enjoy every moment you can on this journey we call life, because you never know what tomorrow brings. This has been the In My Footsteps podcast. I am Christopher Setterlin, but you already knew that, and I'll talk to you all again soon.